Hello, hi everyone. So this is a lecture on the special senses. We are still handling the theme understanding my body structures, um, functions, and how this is linked to malfunctions. So this time we are going to have a look at the special senses. So let's jump right into it. And the first thing is going to be able to understand what we mean by special senses. So when we talk about sensation, we are talking about distribution of receptors because these receptors are the ones that pick signals from either the inside, that is the internal environment, or the external environment, and then transmit these signals to the brain for interpretation. So when we talk about sensation, we are going to be talking a lot about receptors, sensory receptors. So how do we mean by special senses? If they are special, it means there are others that are general. So I'm going to jump into it and to be able to describe what we mean by these two things. And when we talk of special senses, we are talking about complex senses that are coordinated by special organs, and especially the organs are found in the head. And the innervation is through the cranial nerves. And examples of these, we can talk about the vision, which is the organ responsible is the eye, and the innervation, for example, the key sensory nerve here is the optic nerve, and it's a cranial nerve. Then we have hearing, we have equilibrium, we have sense of taste and sense of smell. All these are special senses, as opposed to general senses, or sometimes what we call somatic uh, senses. These are widespread and they're going to be found in the skin, muscles, tendons, joints, viscera, and many other sites of the body. And these ones are responsible for carrying the sense of touch, pressure, stretch, heat, cold, pain, and such like kind of things that, so you can see like the sense of touch, it is distributed all over your body because that is the skin that is responsible. And therefore, that's why we refer to it as a general sense. So how are these special senses different from um, the general senses? So you find, for example, the special senses, you've got vision. The part responsible is the eye. So it's a specific organ that is responsible for that. If you look at hearing, then it is the ear equilibrium, again the ear, then taste, you've got the taste receptors on the tongue. And when you talk about smell, you've got the olfactory system, which starts with the olfactory bulb in the nose. That is how we perceive the sense of smell. But if you look at general senses, you find a specific organ can have very a myriad of roles to play. For example, the skin can be able to detect heat or cold, pressure, pain. The muscles and joints and tendons can be able to detect or they carry the sense of position, which we call proprioception. They also have stretch receptors that respond to compression. And then when we talk about pain receptors, these are either somatic or visceral. Of course, somatic, when we talk about, for example, your skin can be able to sense pain, but the viscera, the internal body organs, also can be able to respond to pain. So um, general senses are widely distributed. They do not have specific organs of the body that are specially uh, destined to be able to perform for that particular sense as opposed to the special senses. So general senses, this you are going to cover. You've already covered it in some of the systems like musculoskeletal system. You've covered general senses in integumentary system. So here we are going to have a look at the special senses now. Okay. So when we talk about, again, this is another slide on the general senses that uses mechanoreceptors to detect pressure, stretch, receptors to detect degree of stretch, and thermoreceptors to detect heat or cold, pain receptors that can be stimulated by different chemicals to detect pain, and we are going to talk about this when we talk about pathology. And then we have chemoreceptors, which can detect the chemical environment in the body or even outside the body, and they are going to be responding to oxygen concentration, for example, carbon dioxide concentration, and you did this in your when you're doing respiratory system. They can be able to detect pH of the blood and respond and make the body respond accordingly. Then we've got photoreceptors that can be able to detect light, and these are especially found in the eye, and they are responsible for detection or vision. So we are going to, there are fun facts here. This presentation you will have, and you can look at these fun facts and try to see and laugh a bit. So we are going to start with vision. So vision as a special sense is a responsibility of the eye, and we have with the eye we have to look at a number of things. So we are going to look at anatomy of the eye and how this anatomy relates to function, because that is what this thing is all about, looking at anatomy and bringing this anatomy in context with the function, because if there is an abnormality, then it is going to be based on this anatomy and the physiology. So let's jump right into it. This is how the eyeball looks like. And when we talk about the eye, we are going to look at structures of the eyeball, structures that are extraocular outside the eyeball that are also very key when it comes to sense of vision. And we have the eyeball, but we also have um, the that is the blood supply to the eye. We've got venous drainage, lymphatic drainage. We also have got the optic nerve that leaves from the eye going to the brain, where this sense of vision is going to be interpreted. And the region of the brain here, we are talking about the occipital lobe. So this is how the eyeball looks like, and the eyeball has different structures. Number one, it is going, of course, it is suspended. It is found in the orbit, and it is suspended in the orbit by different muscles. For example, we've got the superior and the inferior rectus muscles. They suspend the eyeball, but also they help the eyeball to move in different directions. And there are many more other muscles that they are there in your learning guide for you to look at. And the eyeball looks like a globe with a bulge anteriorly, and the structure of the eyeball, we can look from outside inside, where we are going to have different layers. So I'm going to bring this slide to be able to show you the layers of the eyeball first of all. So from outside, we have this layer, the sclera, and this is the white layer of the bone that extends all the way from posterior to the anterior part, going backward like that. So anteriorly, the sclera is very transparent to form the cornea, and this layer is usually fibrous. So we can also call it the fibrous tunic of the eye. And its function, because it is fibrous, it provides a lot of strength to give the eyeball its shape, and also as a protective covering. And then underneath the fibrous, we've got another layer that we call the choroid. And the choroid is, this is also called the vascular tunic. This is the colored part of the eyeball, and it contains blood vessels to nourish the eye. And it extends from posterior to anterior, and anteriorly it is not complete. It is going to leave a space. Anteriorly, what is visible through this, the cornea is what we call the iris. So iris is still part of the choroid, and this is what gives the eye its color. And the iris is not complete. It has got a space in between, what we call the pupil. And this is the part through which light is going to go in. Now, the choroid also offers an attachment for the lens of the eye. The eye has a lens, and this lens is responsible for either contraction or relaxation or extension to be able to change the angle at which the light is hitting the lens, and therefore changing the amount of refraction of that light so that it can fall on the retina at the specified part for vision to occur. Now, the innermost layer of the eye is the retina or the neural tunic, and the retina, as again, it extends all the way to the anterior part like that. Now, the retina contains the sensory receptors, and that is why we call it the neural tunic. So the sensory receptors are found on the retina, and this is where the sensation is going to be taking place. Sorry, something is, yes, here it is. So in the retina, this is where we have our sensory receptors or the photoreceptors. Whatever we're going to describe as rods and cones, they are found on the retina. And once light passes through from the cornea, passing through the lens to the humor and then falls on the retina, then these photoreceptors are able to detect that light and transform it into an impulse that is carried by the optic nerve to the brain for interpretation. So, other parts of the eye we can see here. Um, the lens divides this eye to give us an anterior chamber and a posterior chamber. So, okay, here we've got what we call the aqueous humor, and this is a watery fluid that is found anterior to the lens, and also has got a function in terms of refraction of light. Refraction is bending of light because light is going to be coming through the cornea here, but we need, depending on where the light is coming from, we need to bend it to some degree so that it can fall on the right place in the retina. So when light comes, it is going to pass through the cornea, pass through the aqueous humor, and then into through the pupil into the lens. The lens is the major refractor, and then after that it passes through the vitreous humor, and this is a thick jelly-like fluid that is found in the eye that gives the eye again its shape and rigidity, and then that light is going to fall on the retina. Now, the retina has got a very specific place that is super sensitive, and that is what we call the fovea centralis, and it is this part here. This is where we've got a concentration of photoreceptors. So we usually refract light with an aim of directing it to fall on this particular part because this is the best part where sensation can take place. Now, we have also this part here, which we call the optic disc. Maybe I again bring this photo, it can be able to show us properly. So if you look, the neural tunic, we've got the whole of the retina has rod, but if you come here, the optic disc, the point at which arteries and veins and also the nerve enter and leave, then at this particular part, you do not have the photoreceptors. And this is called also the blind spot of the eye. So in general, that is the anatomy of the eye and how sensations, the light is perceived or traverses the structures of the eye to fall on the fovea centralis for detection, and then it is carried to the occipital lobe for interpretation. So when we talk about vision, the photoreceptors are two kinds. We've got what we call rods and cones, and these are the specialized cells that are able to transduce light. Transduction is change of energy from one form to another. So we've got light energy entering the eye, and this kind of energy has to be converted to an electrical energy so that the nerve can be able to conduct that to the brain, because the brain cannot be able to interpret light. It can't be able to interpret sound. It can't be able to interpret pressure. The only thing the brain knows is electrical impulses. That is what it can be able to interpret. And depending where this electrical impulses is coming from, then it is able to tell what exactly it is. So when you talk about the sense of sight, then we are having light which falls on an object, and this light is reflected into your eye, and then we've got these special cells in the eye that are able to transform that light energy into a nerve impulse. Then this nerve impulse now can be carried to the brain, and the brain interprets that as an image. How wonderful that is. So we've got rods that help us to, okay, the rods are not very specialized. They transform energy, but they only can tell us about black and white, and maybe some shades of gray. But for us to be able to see colors, then we need the cones, and the cones are able to kind of process different colors. They are highly specialized, and they are able to process these different colors for us to be able to tell whether that is green, blue, or whatever kind of color. And the three basic colors that the cones use are the red, green, and blue. And through these colors, then the combinations can help us to tell apart over a million colors. So that is how specialized these cells are. And the other thing that we need to talk about is how the eye adapts to different environments, for example, the light and dark adaptation. And I talked to you already about extraocular muscles that help move the eye in different directions. And then we also have intraocular muscles that also help the eye to adapt or accommodate uh, different kinds of environments. For example, when you enter into a dark room, or when you are in a dark room and then you switch on the light, you can feel a little ache in your eye. Where is that ache coming from? The ache is coming from your eye trying to adapt because, for example, the pupil was very dilated because of darkness. And now there is a lot of light that is going into your eye, which is not very good for your eye. And the eye has to adapt to be able to reduce the intensity of light that is going into your eye. So you've got the intraocular muscles contracting to reduce the size of the pupil. The lens also can try to shorten or lengthen to adapt to what you're looking at. So there's all these adaptations that are key to the functioning of the eye. The other thing is what we call accommodation, and accommodation is, for example, we can look at what happens when you are looking at an object that was far away, and now you immediately change to look at something that is very close to you here. Your eye has got to undergo changes to be able to adapt to that, because when you're looking at an object that is far away, then your lens needs to lengthen to reduce the refraction. You are reducing the angle at which the light is hitting the lens, so you are reducing the refraction so that um, that light that is coming in can fall on the fovea centralis. And when you immediately change and look at something that is really close, then your lens has to shorten to be able to kind of refract that light that is coming in, to refract it more so that again it can fall on the fovea centralis. So this is what we call accommodation, and you will be able to check it out because that question is there again in your learning guide. So essentially, that is it about the physiology of sight. And linked abnormalities here, you can have things like color blindness, and this is usually an inherited male disorder where men are not able to tell apart between green and red. So you can look at how this one comes about. There are many more other abnormalities. For example, you can have, if you have issues with accommodation, then the person can have either long-sightedness or short-sightedness. And you can, when you learn this physiology, then you are able to tell how these things occur. And there are many, many more other abnormalities that you can think of. So long as the physiology is going wrong, then you expect also abnormalities to occur. So that's it about sight. And now I want us to move to another important sensory or an important sense, special sense, and that is hearing and balance. So this is coordinated by the human ear, and this is how the human ear looks like. And of course, this is the external part of the ear. Okay, many people, when they say ear, actually they refer to this external part, but this is just a portion of the ear, but a really huge part of the ear actually remains inside the body, inside actually the petrous portion of the temporal bone. That is where the ear is. So the external part that we see is the pinna, and of course the pinna has got different structures that you can check them out. And the pinna is a funnel-shaped organ that is cartilage coated by skin, and the function of this is to pick sound waves and direct them to inside the ear. So leading from the pinna is the external auditory meatus or the ear canal, and this one leads to the eardrum, what we call the tympanic membrane. So from the pinna to the tympanic membrane, this is what we call the external ear. And then we've got the middle ear, where which is just starts posterior to the tympanic membrane, and this one has got three bones. We've got the malleus, the incus, and the steps, and this is where now the sound waves are going to be transformed into mechanical vibrations by the eardrum, and then that is amplified by these three bones here into the inner ear. So the middle ear is also connected to the pharynx, that is the nasopharynx, by what we call the eustachian tube or the laryngopharynx, that is um, laryngopharyngeal, not like laryngopharyngeal. There's an anatomical name. Sorry, I'm just not getting this right now, but I'll be able to tell you. So the eustachian tube opens from the middle ear to the nasopharynx. And this is a very important tube because it offers a balance of pressure between the middle ear and the external environment. For example, if there is too much pressure in the middle ear, it can make this eardrum to pop and therefore alter the way it vibrates. So to be able to balance that, this eustachian tube can be opened through yawning, for example, and then excess air can go out. And if pressure was more on the outside, then it can be opened and more air goes into the middle ear so that we equalize the pressure between the external environment and the internal and the middle ear. So in here, what happens is bony conduction of sound of sound waves. Here it was air conduction. The sound waves were coming in, and the vibrations were transmitted by air. Now the eardrum changes that, and then these vibrations are transmitted now by the bones through mechanical vibrations, and then it goes into the inner ear. Now in the inner ear, we've got the cochlea. And the cochlea is a snail-shaped kind of organ that has got um, the perilymph and endolymph. So we've got lymph inside the inner ear. So when the steps hits on the oval window in the inner ear, then you find it sends vibrations into the fluid. And that fluid, as it vibrates, it's going to displace some hair cells in the cochlea, which again, the hair cells are actually the receptors for sound. So these hair cells, once they are displaced by the vibrations in the perilymph and endolymph, then they change those vibrations into a nerve impulse, which again is carried by the cochlear nerve into the brain, and that is the temporal lobe, the brain, where that sound is going to be interpreted. So that is the physiology of hearing. And when we talk about, so again here, a summary of the physiology of hearing, detection of sound waves, and this is important because it can be a warning of an imminent danger, localizing a friend. But the most important thing is that communication majorly happens through verbal means, and that is only possible because we can be able to hear sound vibrations, or we can interpret sound vibrations and get to know what the other person is saying or communicating to us. So we can break down hearing physiology into stimuli or the sound waves from the source that are going to be perceived by the ear. So in the ear, we've got conduction of sound waves through air. So we've got air conduction, and then we've got mechanical conduction or the bony conduction. And then after that, we have got fluid conduction in the inner ear, and then that vibrations should be transducted or transformed from vibrations to electrical signals. So we've got transduction of the sound waves, and then to form an electrical impulse, and that impulse must be transmitted. So we've got neurotransmission of the signal to the brain, and then the brain can be able to decode those signals and interpret and tell us what really is going on in the environment. Um, again, the ear is responsible for sensation of balance. And when we talk about balance, this is very key for determination of the body's position in space, and it helps us to maintain our posture. The way you are seated right now, listening to this video, you are not falling off because your body constantly tells you where is your position, and therefore able to maintain you in the right posture. So this occurs mainly in the vestibule of the inner ear, but the sense of position and balance is also coordinated by different other organs, especially tendons and muscles. These organs, they constantly send feedback to the brain to tell the brain about the different position of the auxiliary parts of the body. So that is how sense of position occurs. So again, we can talk about how exactly the sense of balance happens in the inner ear, and that is going to be in the semicircular canal. So we've got three semicircular canals that are arranged at 90 degrees to each other, and that is how we are three-dimensionally able to tell the difference in positions, especially of the head in space. And that is what keeps us from maybe falling off. And that is how somebody can somersault and still land in the right position without falling. So again, I urge you to um, look into the sense of balance and equilibrium more as you look at the inner ear. And this sensation are going to be carried by the vestibular portion of the vestibulocochlear nerve. So thank you. The next thing will be to discuss gustation and olfaction, and then we'll be done So like I told you, so like I told you, the next part is to talk about olfaction and then gustation. Then we'll be done with special senses. So in this section of the video, we're going to talk about olfaction and then gustation, and we will be done with special senses. So olfaction. Olfaction, this is the sense of smell. So where does it happen? Of course, the nose is responsible. It's the sensory organ is found in the nose. And in the nose, we've got, at the roof of the nose, we've got what we call as an olfaction bulb or the olfactory bulb. So the olfactory bulb comprises an epithelium that has got nerve endings of the olfactory nerve. So this is what we call the olfactory epithelium, and it's found on the roof of the nose. And then the olfactory nerve moves from there into the brain, where the sense of smell is interpreted. So, what is the physiology of smell? Again, there's this thing that is the same always. For sensation to happen, you need the sensory input, and then that sensory input must be transducted into an impulse, then that impulse must be carried to the brain for interpretation. So this is basic. No matter what kind of sense you're talking about, that is the basic physiology. We must have an input, sensory input, transduction of the input into a nerve impulse, and then transmission of the nerve impulse to the brain where interpretation happens. So the sense of smell is the same. We are going to have the sensory input as what we call odorants. And odorants, these are these very tiny particles that carry smell. For example, if somebody is frying some onion somewhere, then there are particles that are being emitted from the onion being fried there, and these particles go through diffusion, and then they land in the nose. So when they land in the nose, then they are going to go into that olfactory epithelium. So this is the nose, the olfactory epithelium is above here. Now, when they land on the olfactory epithelium, on this cell, we've got a thin film of fluid where they can be able to dissolve. When they dissolve, then they trigger, because this is a chemical. So again, the olfactory receptors are generally chemoreceptors. So they trigger a depolarization in those receptors, and that depolarization is the transduction of the signal. So now we have nerve impulse. Now this nerve impulse is going to be transmitted into the brain, where interpretation is going to occur. So where exactly in the brain this happens? We've got in the brain, you see, this nerve goes right ahead superiorly into the base of the temporal lobe, where we've got some olfactory centers, and then other tracts are going to go to the thalamus, where we've got the thalamic centers as well. And this is where interpretation and memory of the sense of smell is done. So generally that is it about olfaction. So um, the next is to talk about the sense of smell, and sense of smell here we all know. Sorry, sense of taste. Oh, I'm getting tired. So the sense of taste, this happens in the mouth, and the organ for taste is the tongue. So yes, this is the mouth, and that is the tongue. So of course, anatomy of the mouth, you've got your teeth, you've got your hard palate, you've got the soft palate, you've got the uvula, tonsils around the uvula. And then this is the tongue, our precious organ. Of towards the lips. So if we look at the tongue, basic anatomy of the tongue, we've got the central sulcus of the tongue that divides the tongue into right and left. And this is the base of the tongue, this is the tip of the tongue, and this is where we have the body of the tongue. Now, the tongue has got what we call um, the taste buds, and these taste buds are going to be, we have different types of taste buds. For example, we have got the circumvallate papillae that are found towards the base of the tongue. We've got the filiform papillae, yeah, on the lateral edges of the tongue, and at the towards the central sulcus of the tongue, we've got the filiform papillae, and laterally kabisa, we've got the foliate papillae. So different taste buds are going to be found in different areas of the tongue, and these different taste buds, they test different kinds of stimuli. So the primary tests are the sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and um, umami. I'm really not sure what this is. So, but these are the basic kinds of tests, and scientists say that for different kinds of tests, we've got different primary areas that are able to test that particular kind of test. So, how is the sense of test, or the physiology of sense of test? Again, the sensory stimuli is going to be the particular thing that you put on the tongue, be it food or any other substance. So whatever you put on the tongue, number one, dissolves in that tongue, and then we've got receptors on the tongue that are able to depolarize and then send signals. So the receptor that is depolarized by that particular chemical then is the one that is testing that particular chemical. For example, the sour test will not depolarize the salty papillae, and therefore this is how we are able to tell. Depending on which receptors are depolarized, the body is able to tell what kind of test, or the brain is able to tell what kind of test that is. So that is it about special senses, and I hope this video has given you the key outline and the framework of special senses, and now you are able to go into it and be able to tell the rest of the things. So thank you very much, and I hope to interact with you more as you continue learning the special senses. So please enjoy.